Hello, everyone. As of February 2025, the U.S. economy is exhibiting mixed signals. While the unemployment rate remains low at 4%, but it's climbing again, consumer confidence has declined sharply, reaching an 8-month low, partly due to concerns over recent policy changes. Inflationary pressures persist, with the Fed Reserve considering interest rate hikes again to combat potential inflation headwinds. In New York City, the real estate market is showing signs of resilience. In January, there was a notable increase in signed contract activity compared to the same month in the previous year, indicating a strong start of this year. Additionally, property values are expected to rise sharply in fiscal 25, marking a turning point for developers, investors, and stakeholders across the city. Yet in other sectors of the U.S., housing prices are said to be plummeting. Additionally, rising property taxes and increased maintenance costs in co-ops and condos may affect affordability for potential buyers. But overall, while the U.S. economy is facing many challenges this year, the New York City real estate market is demonstrating resilience with positive trends, hopefully, in residential sales and property values. And at the table with me today are Greg Heym, our chief economist here at Brown Harris Stevens, Ryan Garson from Compass, and Jared Antin from Elegran Forbes Global Properties. And they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. I am Vince Rocco, and this is Talking New York Real Estate. So let's go behind the headlines and inside real estate, the state of our industry.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. As an official moving partner of Brown Harris Stevens, we know that your clients deserve more than just a move. At Roadway Moving and Storage, we turn moving into an experience they will love. From specialized services to a white glove treatment, we've got it all covered. When you choose Roadway, you're choosing a peace of mind for your clients. Plus, our referral program is the most rewarding in the industry. Want to learn more? Shoot me an email at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So we have the heavyweights here at the table today, truly successful agents and managers, and our chief economist here at Brown Harris Stevens, who also, by the way, hosts a great show called Crossing the Line here on the network, More Network, so you must pay attention to it or listen to it if you haven't. Watch it if you haven't already. We're going to talk a little bit about the economy, the U.S. economy today, but as it relates to New York real estate, how it affects everything we do here with our housing market. You know, there's all kinds of commentary, there's all kinds of positive, negative, whatever. Where are we? Buyer's market, seller's market, somewhere in the middle. I don't have an answer for it, but maybe these guys can give us a better answer. Greg, I'm going to start with you because, you know, reading your reports as I do every month, and I send them out to all of my distribution list all the time. I read something about consumer confidence that you wrote in the last report that said it's dropped so much, even though the overall economy is showing strong. And you use the word, the reason for it, or one of the reasons for it, is expectations. Consumers have grown more pessimistic about the future. Can you kind of explain that to us? Why we're pessimistic, why our expectations are not in line with what we have been used to for the last couple of years?
Well, yeah, you want to know two things. How are they feeling now, right? Because consumer spending is 70% of GDP and drives the economy. And then what they expect for the future and what that might mean. And there's, you know, an increasing amount of uncertainty that's gone on. We've seen it over the last couple of weeks. Tariffs, no tariffs, tariffs, no tariffs. What does that mean? I think anytime, you know, something gains traction, people are really isolated on it. And they forget that, like you said in the opening, there's still a very low unemployment rate. Hiring is still pretty good. Jobs claims have been rising, but they're still historically low. So overall, you have a decent economy right now, but the problem is inflation is not coming down, which is not helping the housing market, although mortgage rates have fallen the past 6 weeks. So that's some momentum. You know, we're almost rooting for a slowdown in the economy because that's what's going to get inflation down. That's what's going to get rates down and make housing a hell of a lot more affordable for people. But you feel bad kind of rooting. It's like you root for your team to tank at the end of the year to get the better draft pick. That's okay. But, you know, we don't want to see any real big pickup in unemployment. We'll see what happens with the jobs numbers for February, how that turns out. Because right now, the past week, the data has not been great if we look at it. But we have to take perspective on it. You're going from what's been an unbelievably hot period of hiring to now it's like a more normal process to get a job. And people think that that means that things are getting worse. But it's the unknown. And the thing about tariffs, just remember a couple things. We've had tariffs in this country. They're not a new thing. There were a bunch of them passed the last time this administration was in charge. Inflation remained under 2%. Tariffs by themselves do not cause inflation. They raise the price of that product, but they do not raise prices throughout the economy. And that's what gets lost in this. Tariffs say, oh, they're going to stoke inflation. And how much of that tariff we wind up paying is really up to the product. Now, what I mean by that is if it's a product that can only come from that country, and that's the only place you can get it, or people want it there, then you're probably going to pay close to the tariff amount. If it's something you can get elsewhere, the power's not there, the producer might eat some of that cost. Or if our currency rises against their currency, it becomes cheaper for us. So just you're hearing numbers like 10, 25%, that doesn't mean the prices of those products are going up by that much. Just like when the Fed cut rates 1%, did anybody see a 1% decline in their credit card rate? No, you did not. So,
and it didn't really affect the housing, the mortgage.
Well, because again, and this is, the Treasury Secretary said this, they are focused on the 10-year Treasury. Because what the Fed does has no direct impact on mortgage rates. And the Fed has made another mistake in a long list of mistakes. By cutting rates aggressively last year when the economy wasn't doing that poorly, I know you have to do it in advance, but you should see more signs before you start flooding money, because now that right at the time the hikes are starting to work, now you have stimulus that's going to come into the economy because it takes 6 months to a year for this stuff to filter in, and inflation's going to stay above where we want it. So I think people are seeing that. The volatility in the stock market is there. Every day something gets said about a new policy change. You see a direct, instantaneous reaction to it. There's a lot of concern. All three indexes are down for the year now, particularly NASDAQ. There's been a lot of concern there that NVIDIA is maybe overvalued and, what's going on there. Cryptocurrencies are being talked about with the reserve. So there's enough to keep your head spinning if you look for it. So where does that all goes into, you talk about what the U.S. economy and everything does to our housing market. It's the confidence that it either gives the buyer or seller or takes away because people feel they don't have a handle on what's going on. And look, you have some surety in mortgage rates. They've been drifting lower. I don't think, unless the February jobs report is like on steroids, that you're going to see it reverse course. I don't expect it to keep falling every week, but at least I think buyers out there can get a sense of where they're at. They're not have to worry about maybe rushing, like I got a block today. And hopefully things can get calmed down with this tariff stuff and we can get back to business. We're going to
talk a little bit more about the interest rates in a little bit, but let me zero in for a minute on, the unemployment statistic. I think I said at the top of the show that it's been down. The job growth has been pretty decent the last year or so. All of a sudden, I read somewhere the other day that unemployment now seems to be ticking up.
Well, the initial claims for unemployment went up, not significantly, but it was
But
pretty
what
big
does that do to, Greg?
Well, a lot of people think it's Doge. There's
well,
a lot of people
does
that
it have anything to do with the government restructuring, for lack of a better way to
describe
it?
Look, the thing about, you have to remember a couple things about initial claims for unemployment or jobless claims.
Right.
It's a weekly statistic. Weekly data can be incredibly volatile. It's not set up to be like an official government statistic. It's just the states reporting these claims. So there can be massive revisions and, look at the trend more than a week. But even sitting a little over 240,000 claims, that's over 100,000 less than the historical average in the history they've been collecting this. So again, more people filing for unemployment, it doesn't mean a recession's around the corner. That being said, you look at consumer spending, which was negative in January. You look at a massive amount of imports that came in last month before the tariffs. Let's get them in. And right now, the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now predictor is pointing to negative growth for the first quarter. That does not mean we're in recession. There's a lot of things. You have to look at the components of GDP, and you look at a one-off event like a mass amount of importation of goods to avoid paying tariffs on it. You have to throw that out and really look at what the consumer is doing. And the problem is when confidence goes down, consumers will spend less, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, just like when CFOs are pessimistic and they stop doing research and development and expansion.
Jared Antin, we're going to talk about your couple of articles in a minute about the overall marketplace, but just hearing what Greg is talking about, consumer confidence, how do you see that affecting the market from a buyer's perspective, a seller's perspective? What are the agents telling you on a daily basis about hesitation out there with kind of pulling the trigger? We can all say, the market has seen a little bit of a lot more robust activity since the end of last year into the start of this year. But as people say to me all the time, but Vince, there's a lot of activity, and I had 3 open houses last night and 1 person showed up. Okay, so, and sometimes I get the week before I got whacked with 30 people showing up. So what's the hesitation, or what is it that needs to happen from a confidence perspective that the buyers out there used to have?
Yeah, so Greg obviously gave a lot of great overview on what's happening, and there's some really key things that are contributing to a buyer or seller either transacting, window shopping, or not at all engaging. So one is they absolutely need to feel secure in their current personal financial state and their near-term and mid-term employment prospects. So they need to feel comfortable, and that's where the labor or the unemployment comes in, is if there's increasing layoffs, that gives people pause in terms of what their own prospects may be. When it comes to expenses and inflation, that gives them some concern, as well as what's happening with the stock market, right? When things are going up or things are doing well, they have a bit more concern. When stocks start falling like they've done, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, it does create some hesitation. So people like there to be a sense of security, a sense of calm, and sense of peace. And, we certainly don't have all of the answers right now. And anyone that could or thought they could predict what's going to happen, there's now this new X factor of throwing instability into, the equation. Consumers, though, mortgage rates has been obviously a key thing. And I've sat in this chair and gone on record and been wrong, and that's okay. We're all wrong in predicting things, that rates would drop to 5.5% by now, and there would be this massive reshuffling. Obviously, that didn't happen, but what is happening now is there is a consumer expectation and a shifting understanding that we're not waiting for rates to drop to a magical number. There's also not this fear that rates are going to drastically run higher. So we're shifting from this waiting for this perfect moment where there would have been this game of like musical chairs to consumers now transacting based upon when do they actually have a need to move. What's their life event? What's their family event? What's their employment event? What is happening that's requiring them to need something different? And that's important. Rates are currently at, the aggregate number about 6.75. The expectation is rates may trend down to 6.5 and sort of normalize around there for the foreseeable future. Now, Greg talked about, bad news can be good news, and that's true. A mild recession, I believe, would actually be really good for New York City real estate. One is it would bring rates down a bit. 2 is it'll increase the RTO and getting more employees back into the New York office, which would increase demand for local real estate and come at the cost or the sacrifice of some of the secondary or Sunbelt markets that are already starting to show cracks. So New York City does have a lot of positive things going for it. We're starting to break out of that, 8-year price ceiling last set in 2016, and we've seen a very consistent and stable level of demand. Now, there's some important cracks that may be forming there that are important to look at. So if you look at November and December, there was actually some pull forward of demand after the election. There was a little bit of a relief rally, whether you liked or didn't like the result. The fact that it was quick and decisive one way or the other gave people the confidence to be able to transact. Because one of those big things that an uncertainty was what was going to happen with the election and is it going to be drawn out. So I think we absolutely saw some pull forward of demand where contract activity accelerated into the fourth quarter. We saw above average contract activity in Manhattan in November and December, and we saw it, although increased into January and February, as you would expect from a seasonal, it started lagging behind the average, and we were actually just below the average in January and February. So I question a little bit how much of a spring movement we're going to have, how much that pull forward affected the velocity. So again, we're acting at sort of this average, but we've all been hoping and praying that we'd have this general unlocking. And I think what's happening is we're getting this larger realization that that's not going to happen. And it's about meeting the consumer, the buyer, the seller, the renter, the landlord, where they are, when they want to be there, and delivering really good service then.
Ryan Garson, we talk about confidence, we talk about, client expectation, whatever, consumer, really wanting things to turn around and get better. You and I had a brief conversation prior to the show this morning about the stock market. I had mentioned to you, I put the television on 7 o'clock this morning, and the stock market was crashing, and the anchors were saying like, oh my God, this is like really bad. And your reaction was, oh shit. And I had the same reaction at 7 o'clock this morning. In your opinion, how is that going to affect your day today, your week today, as a successful agent out there representing both buyers and sellers? Where do you think that's going to place in the minds of people who were beginning to think about real estate?
Yeah, well, thank you guys.
And they both
pleasure to be here with
terrific.
Greg and Jared. Yeah, I mean, the headlines they're crazy right now. They're all over the place, but I think there's like a tale of two different consumers, of two different markets. There's the high and the low. I think what Jared was saying, right after post-election, there was definitely a bump in contract signed, which Absolutely. I think we really needed as a market, being on this like historic 2-year low as far as transactions goes. But, January and February were a little bit lower based on our historical averages. So like that's like, where does that put us going into the spring market? I feel like the luxury market, I think the luxury buyer has a positive mentality. Like they've made a lot of money in the stock market, in crypto, and I think they probably, can afford to take a loss in the stock market. And I think a lot of it has to do on like their need, because the rental market, as bad as the sales market, the rental market is even worse. If you're a renter right now, it's a really bad experience. Inventory is low. You don't have any stability in a rental. And like, I feel like in my target market of like who I'm dealing with, mostly like families, like I think that consumer wants longevity. Like they're
stability.
Here. They want stability. They've been in New York City. They're looking for, their schools right now. They want to be, in their home for the next 10 years. So I feel like it's a good market for that consumer, I think, on the buy side and the sell side. I feel like prices right now, I think like the one thing that buyers are really looking at is affordability. Like they're talking to their mortgage broker, they're seeing like what their monthlies look at. Like they're really looking at the building financials. They're looking at the maintenance history. I think affordability is probably like the number one. And honestly, like I've had a couple of buyers that have like said, you know what, I'm gonna step out this year because it just doesn't make sense for them with the mortgage and common charges and taxes. So
and interest rate on the mortgage, yeah.
And the interest rates was really like, if we went down to 5.5%, I think it would be the floodgates would open. But I think, all right, where does that put us right now going into this spring market? I'm actually very bullish on it. I think the one thing that we've seen is tight inventory, and so that's a reason why transactions have been down. But I have a feeling like there's going to be an influx of new inventory coming on. Not that we talked about the reshuffling of like past listings, but actually like new product coming to market. And another interesting fact is like new development sales are really down as well. Like there's not a lot of new product that's coming to market. Yeah. They're down, I think, transaction-wise, almost like 30%. Because they only have like their old inventory, and without new buildings coming online, the new development market is pretty tight. So I'm actually pretty bullish on the market that I focus on, the resale market. With more inventory coming on, I think also the buyers have the new mentality, like where they're fine with like the 6-ish interest rate. Like they kind of get it, where maybe like a year and a half ago they scoffed at it. And also I'm talking to a lot of buyers that have interest only or 7-year or 10-year ARMs that are coming due, and those owners need to sell.
Those are going to
or they're going to refinance at a much higher rate, and their monthlies are going to be much higher.
All right, we have to take a break. We have so much more coming. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, everybody, we are back. We're here with Ryan and Greg and Jared. Greg, so, along, the line of confidence, as we talked about before the break, inventory and signed contracts, for example. Ryan mentioned that inventory is kind of tight right now. We'll get to that in a minute. But signed contracts, I don't like to use percentages, but I think when I was reading the other day, 12% increase in January, not as great as it could be, but higher than it's been. What tell us about the signed contracts? What price point is that increase and where?
Well, looking year over year, last year didn't start well either. So,
no, but it was higher than last year.
We can look at bad weather that we've had, and it's been a terrible winter in so many ways. But it ebbs and flows with available inventory. Like luxury has had some phenomenal weeks lately, when the rest of the market is dragged, because luxury doesn't
define luxury.
Well, if you want to say over 5 million or 7 million,
that's fine.
It seems like we're all focused on super luxury these days, but because that's the cooler stuff. But that's your cash buyers taking advantage. That's the thing. You talk about stocks and uncertainty. When stocks have big down days, at the end of the day, usually people start buying because they see value, and I think the luxury buyer can do that. Where the other data really does ebb and flow with the interest rates. And we would expect to see in the coming weeks an uptick in signed contracts, I would think in the under 2 market, with people taking advantage because maybe they missed out last year when they thought in September rates were really going to break 6%. And we were all happy about it. And then all of a sudden, back up to 7. Yeah. And they lost the opportunity. I think they're going to take that opportunity now. The city also has its challenges. We don't know the status of the mayor, really. And
we have a new candidate, though.
We do have a new candidate.
Andrew.
Interesting return. But so that's all. You have local uncertainty. The MTA has issues. They have severe budgetary problems. It's great to want everybody back to work, and
Don't even
ridership's
get me started on
increasing.
congestion pricing, okay?
Well, that's another thing that's sort of up in the
had
air.
heart failure yesterday.
And remember, too, that the SALT cap is out there, being discussed because tax reform does expire at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. Now, just remember that I don't see it going away. The SALT cap, it may get raised, which will be nice, but not significantly helpful. Remember, most people on both sides of the aisle don't want the SALT cap deduction removed, because it doesn't affect their areas. We're talking about something that affects like 4 or 5 states. Both parties have had a chance to make the change. They haven't done it.
But it affects my area as a broker.
I understand that, buddy. But we had a pretty good market in 21 and the first half of 22 with the SALT cap in place. Correct. So markets do adjust. Remember we've had increase in transfer taxes, mansion taxes. Right. We've survived them. Right. The city has remained a desirable place. Now the contract signed data nationally, it just came out last week. Pending home sales was the lowest on record for January, and their records go back a little over 20 years, almost 25 years. So and that's directly tied to mortgage rates.
Yeah. And inventory.
Right. And inventory, I know brokers always say it's tight here. I would say it's more neutral.
Correct.
But then people say, well, nobody wants half of it. So you forget that inventory. I get that all the time. But I think that, the amazing thing about New York and Manhattan specifically is since 2019, prices haven't moved much. And that sounds ridiculous when you think about it. COVID shut the city down for all those months, right?
You're right.
And the prices didn't go down that much. And then we had the greatest year and a half that we've ever had. Prices didn't go up that much because unlike the Floridas and Connecticut's and Nassau and Suffolk counties of the world, Manhattan had inventory, and inventory keeps people in check. It keeps sellers from getting too aggressive. And I think we've seen prices drift lower last year a little bit. That's good. But remember this, if the rates do come down, let's say we all get our wish and we're jumping around at 5.5%, that's going to absorb inventory. And the price increases that come from that could negate your interest rate savings, and you can't change the price you pay for a home. Correct. You can change the rate. So trying to time 2 things at the same time is impossible. Right. Trying to time one of them is impossible. So I think, again, we have to remember, home is a long-term investment. It should be made based on long-term, decisions and circumstances, and you'll be okay. Trying to find the exact right time to buy a house like it's a stock is a ridiculous expectation to have, because there are hundreds of thousands of people that spend all day looking at years of data to figure out stock prices, and they can't get those right. Here we have a couple thousand apartments that sell in a quarter. It's not a lot of real-time data to go on. So just buyer beware, literally, with something like that.
And Jared Antin, so, we're talking about, the economy in general, how it affects the New York marketplace. You just recently published an article or wrote an article, Punishingly, I got that right, Efficient Markets. And I'm going to read, your intro because it's worth reading. While the data suggests that Manhattan tips in favor of sellers, many would-be sellers are finding a far more challenging reality. Recent metrics in the winter months right now show heightened contract activity alongside historically low inventory, and we talked about a lot of this already, conditions that typically favor sellers. Yet, this market is actually punishingly efficient. Properties that are pristine, perfectly positioned, and accurately priced sell quickly while others stagnate. I mean, when I read that the other day, I said, that's like hitting it right in the bullseye, okay? But explain that to the people out there who may not understand what we mean about everything with a listing has to be perfect or it's just not going to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vince. So New York City has always been an efficient market, meaning that the market's going to give you real-time feedback. If it's positioned properly, it's going to sell and transact. This market is traditionally liquid. We're not talking about Manhattan, Kansas that has a limited buyer pool, right? New York City remains a top 5 international real estate destination and is an iconic place. So the market has always been efficient. I've inserted and coined the term punishingly efficient in the last couple of weeks and 2 months because I've struggled to speak to sellers and explain that while the data technically shows that it's a seller's market, because again, we had above average contract activity in the winter months coupled with some rising prices and lower supply, that technically shifts the Elegran leverage index to favor sellers, but it's not equal. So I had to discuss with sellers that we're trying to list that they can't get crazy with pricing to the upside. And I've had many conversations with sellers who are listed with other agents frustrated about why it didn't sell. So incomes is punishingly efficient. That's all about saying at the right price, there's going to be a market for their home. And in order to make sure that things can sell, you have to present it perfectly. It's not just about taking photos of 4 walls and put it up. You have to be able to create the story and tell the narrative and explain the lifestyle, especially for higher end properties, about what purchasing that piece of real estate is going to enable the buyer to be able to do and enjoy. Secondly, it has to be renovated. There's about an 18% premium right now for renovated versus unrenovated, but the problem is, again, the middle. So renovated turnkey properties are going to trade well. Unrenovated properties that need a gut, think like an estate sale, are going to trade at a discount, and someone's going to come in and do the work. But it's a hassle to do the work right now. Supply chain is still an issue. Cost is still an issue. Good labor is still an issue. And dealing with the boards is just a nightmare. So how do you make sure that you get the right bang for the buck? If you're going to do a complete gut, it could be worth going through all those hoops. But when you have properties that sort of fall in the middle, where maybe there's a kitchen and 1 bathroom renovated, but you have the Achilles heel of this other bathroom that's not renovated, or the floors are still parquet, or there's something, the owners don't want to price it at a discount, and the buyers are basically valuing it almost like it's a gut because of the hassle to just fix the 1 or 2 things. Now, that's where this middle falls, like properties that had an 8 to 12-year-old renovation. They're perfectly livable. They look fine, but they're not new. And the owners, everyone believes, mine is better than yours, mine is worth more than yours. So they're going to hold a certain price there. And then the last thing comes with composition. So we've seen issues where we've had very, very large square footage for the bedroom count. And
where you say every square foot and every dollar matters.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah. So we've seen like 5,000 square foot 3 bedrooms. They're not commanding the value of a typical 3-bed because they're 2,000 square feet too large. Studios. There's not really a market for studios now because people would rather pay a little bit extra and buy the 1 bedroom that offers them so much more flexibility from a lifestyle. So there's just fundamentally not a market for every property today. And I've had this conversation more times than I can count. The price that it would take to clear a property today that is not desirable for one reason or another, studios is a perfect example within co-ops, it wouldn't clear the board, and it certainly wouldn't be palatable necessarily to the seller. So into pricing, this has put this price floor. It has reduced the amount of properties that can necessarily transact, and Greg is 100% correct, and I also wrote an insights piece on this. Manhattan is poised, and it's already starting to do this, break out of that 8-year price ceiling, where our prices have not really increased since the previous peak in 2016. And the national average has gone up a whopping 74%, with some of the key markets in Florida well over 100% in that time period. So there's an arbitrage opportunity. New York City is arguably undervalued in many different ways. And where you're seeing other markets in the West or the Sun Belt start to crack and start to have price drops, we're poised to appreciate. Now, I'm not saying we're going to catch up or exceed the aggregate price appreciation, but I think our market is going to do better than most.
Let me ask you something, because your analysis is correct, but most people would look at the Manhattan marketplace, the New York City marketplace, and say, we're way overpriced. Our prices have to come down. It's absolutely insane. But your point just now with we have not caught up with the rest of the country from a price increase perspective. Explain that to the listeners who think that we are the elite and our prices are so crazy, and the reason our market is slow is because of that, and we need to come down to be more competitive. I mean, I happen to agree with you because I've been in this business for too long, but what's the explanation?
Yeah, so it's not an
Why
aggregate.
aren't we catching up?
It's not an aggregate cost. The reason we haven't caught up is in part unfavorable taxation, unfavorable local policies, and treating the wealthy as they're the enemy of the city. Those are some of the key things. Again, not easily fixable. There's been some attempts to fix them that have arguably caused way more confusion or issues and unintended consequences. We've talked about that on a prior show. But the prices in New York City are fundamentally not that expensive. The carrying costs have not risen any more than other areas. Florida has seen incredible increases in, common charges in light of the condo collapse and the insurance and everything like that. So fundamentally, our market is not so expensive, right? And even if you look in the suburban markets, I remember as a kid growing up in Westchester, anywhere I went, real estate elsewhere seemed cheap, except for maybe California. Now, Westchester actually looks fairly inexpensive or fairly affordable compared to other places. Yes, our property taxes are still a bit higher, but from an aggregate price, we're not that high. And we in New York City, we have that price floor that, again, is going to keep prices without going below a certain level. And because and co-ops have saved us time and time from seeing prices fall further because they require people to have incredible liquidity. We're not at 3.5% equity. We're not doing these FHA loans. So buyers are entrenched and they have a lot of skin in the game. And they're not when prices fall, they're going to just go away. They're going to come off market. They're not going to go and meet that down bid except for the rare instance. So that has created stability and expectations and has allowed New York City to perform like a blue chip investment, like the Dow. It's not going to rapidly fall like a hot tech stock. It's going to do that nice slow climb. Now, we haven't climbed in a while. But again, I believe the market is creating this next upward path. We have not seen any appreciation in our market in a meaningful way since that 2012 to 2015 rise.
Ryan, so according to what Jared also wrote in this piece is, the buyer's new mindset, okay? Gone are the days, he said, of fear of missing out or FOMO, okay? So what is the buyer's new mindset today based on everything we've talked about so far, interest rates and lower inventory or, all kinds of, increases in common charges and maintenance and taxes? What is the buyer's new mindset today?
I think
have we defined
I think the fear of missing out is long gone, and it's the fear of overpaying. I think they just are very cost conscious. They're looking at their monthlies, they're looking at the mortgage, they're looking at the comps. It's very transparent of what's out there, of what the last 8 years have looked at, where the appreciation is. So I think they're doing their due diligence. They have a lot of data. 90% of the time they're working with a broker, and I think they want a deal. But I don't want to say there's. I actually think they're having a hard time finding exactly what they want, and I think there has to be concessions met. But I do believe what Jared's saying, and I feel like we're kind of due for like a jump. And there's a couple listings that I'm bringing to market where I've had like really detailed conversations with the sellers, looking over the comps together, like being collaborative on like how we're going to price it, like what our strategy is. And like I feel like people that have bought, in like I think like the 2017-18 buyer, like they're probably having a pretty hard time. But like the anybody who bought over COVID, and usually like rule of thumb is you stay in an apartment in New York City 4 or 5 years, those buyers, those sellers now are actually ready to like make some money, and where they can get that, 20 to 30% appreciation. And like where I actually live in a building that was built in 2017, 18. And I've had a lot of tough conversations with those sellers where they're taking losses. And I think it's like anytime you're a real estate agent and you're really in it with the seller and like, you're working hard to sell a property that they're going to take a loss. It's not a happy transaction. And like, we're in the happy business. I'm the very social broker. Like I want to be, I want good
Am I a happy
energy.
economist? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, exactly. We don't want the doom and gloom. We want, but I feel like hopefully like this market after like 2 really rough years in New York City is like that kind of market where we can take the jump. And I don't think it's like extreme. I think it's just, it's that slow roll. Like I like the comparison. Like New York City is our blue chip stocks. Like, they're not having that, 40, 50% appreciation.
But that's what's so unsettling, I think, because it is the blue chips.
But also like, look what happened in Miami. In Miami right now, that market is in a terrible situation. Yeah. Like they had that huge COVID appreciation, and now the sellers and buyers are at a major disconnect because like the sellers want the prices a couple years ago, the buyers are like, wow, this is way overpriced, and like transactions are down almost 30% there.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Miami marketplace. Forget the COVID bump, but what about going all the way back to 2008 and 9 when it was devastated, and then all of a sudden it came back and has been screaming back for a long time. So everything has its moment, including right here in New York City. So I'm wondering, does the Miami market continue to, implode? Does it continue to slow down and kind of, go flat for a while because it was booming for very, very long? Just like the highs or the ups and downs here.
Wait, just real quick. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the Miami market, but I am sure that Miami residents are moving back to New York City. I'm seeing a lot of that.
Well, good. I like that too. And that is a fact. Greg, let's talk a little bit about inflation again. I mean, if it does increase, if it does stay where it is, if we don't show signs of it coming down to levels that we want it to come down to, right? For the longest time, most of last year, Powell kept saying, we want to get it down to 2%. We want to get it down to 2%. We came, how close? 2.3%? I mean, but still, it wasn't good enough for, the masses. Prices didn't come down. What the hell does 2% mean anyway?
Well, you have to pick a target, right? What's the consistent rate that we want to see? And they're using a more dynamic approach. What that means is they don't have to put everything on hold till they get to 2%, which obviously they didn't wait for, and it seems like they've stoked inflation again. The problem now is that core inflation is rising more than the headline number. Core inflation strips out food and energy prices because they tend to be very volatile. The only prices that we've seen any decline with over the last couple of years are energy prices at times. We've seen massive declines. The problem is housing when it comes to the headline number, because housing is accounting for about half these monthly increases that we keep seeing. And, especially the way it's measured in CPI in these 6-month increments, some of that's statistical.
Consumer price index.
The Fed can say, well, you know what? They're only checking back on these properties every 6 months. They're using owner's equivalent rent, which I actually agree with. You can't use sales prices to value the cost of something, because if your house is doubled in value, it's still costing you the same amount as it was before, right? So that's why we look at the PCE data, because the personal consumption expenditures is the final word on spending and prices. That's the lowest of the numbers you could look at right now, 2.6. It actually went down from the prior month, the core number. So they can say, they were able to get away with it last year that, all right, we're not there, but we're moving there. And then you look at their economic forecast and they don't expect to be down at 2% till next year. And you go, okay, that's going to be a rough ride. And I think people, again, just like they have the wrong idea about tariffs, have the wrong idea about rate cuts. It's not the solution to every problem. It's not going to change mortgage rates. It can make them go up. And, what happened last week? The yield curve inverted again. Now, we had an inverted yield curve for 2 years and no recession, so don't get too worried about that. It's the term we like to call the new normal. But I think the problem with inflation is...
I get nervous with the new normal.
No, the problem with inflation is that it's been going on for so long now. And the two things that's hit the hardest are housing and food, to the average person. Also known as the two basic needs of every human being, right? There's a place to live.
$12 for a dozen eggs. I mean,
and
really.
that's the problem. And how do you get those prices down? And they forget about the cause of inflation. That's the problem. They haven't read Milton Friedman in a long time. It's all about money, period. Too much money chasing not enough goods.
Correct.
It's the simplest thing. And what did we do during COVID? We increased the money supply by 40%. Forget about the supply chain stuff, because that has been worked out to the point where that's not the problem.
Well, we're getting rid of the penny, so we should fix that,
Well, when
right?
it costs twice as much to make it, it talk about inflation.
I don't want to get rid of the penny, for heaven's sake. All right, we got to take a quick break and come back with the guys here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some strategies for success based on Jared's article. Don't go anywhere. This is Talking New York Real Estate. We're coming right back.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So, Jared, let me ask you, in your article, strategies for success in a hyper-efficient market. Translated, what do we need to do to be more efficient, to get the word out there, to get more people recognizing that our listings are worth it and they should be bought?
Sure. So in the spirit of inflation, I'm happy to give my 4 cents. Sorry, I had to use it here. We did
Leave
it in
the
break.
economics.
It's a during the break.
Economics
It's during
jokes
the
to
break.
the
Good job.
economists.
Yeah, there we go.
We need them.
Transparency is key. So you need the real estate agents to be incredibly good advisors, and you need to be honest with clients about where you're going to price. I've been in so many conversations with sellers where another agent's going to come in, and this is not a new phenomenon. This has been around since the day is old. That brokers will come in and overpromise on price as a way to win the listing. I'm here to tell all the brokers and all the sellers that you can win the listing, but that's not going to get you to sell the listing. And I have conversations all the time, whether it's with sellers or with agents, that there's things that you do to win a listing, and there's things that you actually do to deliver value and sell the property. So overpricing a listing will get you the listing. It will not sell the listing. In 2012 and 2014, when there was FOMO, when things were flying off the shelves, when buyers just wanted to buy something because prices were going up 1% a month, sure, that's not the case today. Buyers are discerning, they're picky, and to Ryan's point, they're going to only buy what they want, and that's a small subset of the inventory. So brokers and sellers need to know if they have a gem that hits all of the things. It looks perfect, it's the right composition, it's priced well, it's marketed to perfection, it looks beautifully, it's going to sell well, and you have a little bit of power to price there. But if it's anything less than that, then if you don't hit the bill with the right presentation, the right renovation, or the right composition, your only other move is to use price to your advantage. You can create a buyer's market or a seller's market based upon how you price. Now, I know sellers will believe that me as an agent standing here and tell you that the easiest way to sell your house is to price it lower. I get how that can be seen as a cop-out, but I'm telling you, if you want to sell your house, that's the only way. Now, there's things that you can do to make sure that you protect your interests, that you get the right offer, the right buyer, the right terms, and you get the right price for you today. But I'm here to say very clearly, there is no buyer in the market that is going to pay more than it's worth. And that's the basis of the definition of an efficient market and having that transparency. Now, can you find a one-off buyer that just loves it and falls in love and wants to overpay? Sure, but that's only if you have a trophy asset or something incredibly unique. 98% of the market, these things are a dime a dozen. They're cookie cutters. There's 4 walls. They follow a very, repeatable floor plan. So unless you're that unique trophy seller, I'm here to say that if you do want to sell your property, you have to price it accordingly and trust your broker. Ask 3 brokers. Take the aggregate of what they're telling you. But price is going to move the market today. Now, it still has to look great. It still has to be marketed to perfection, and you still need to tell the story in order to create that emotional connection with buyer. But price is an important thing. And if you don't like the price you're going to get today, then you have an incredibly strong rental market. Consider renting it for a year or 2 until the market does recover, because I do believe prices are on their rebound. I do believe that the market will expand, and if there's not a market for your property today, there may be one there in a year or 2. So you do have the option of going into the rental market. And that's part of the reason why we have that price floor, because sellers have other options here to be able to leverage their asset rather than just selling it for a lower price than they want to sell. You
talk about know your micro market. Is a trophy property part of the micro market that you refer to here in the in this article?
Yeah, so a trophy property has its own different micro market. So if you're dealing with, I'm going to call them the dime a dozen properties, you have to understand how every building is different, where the view breaks are, every little micro block, because I can give you the aggregate of what's happening in the market, but that's sort of irrelevant. It's relevant what's happening in the micro market based upon the specific block, the specific cross street, the specific condo co-op price point, things like that, because each segment of the market, each price point is doing something a little bit different. Trophy properties are generally going to skew more to the higher end consumer. They're a little bit less sensitive to what's happening now. They're going to buy because they really just want something, and they're going to buy because of the lifestyle that affords. And there, it's important to do impeccable marketing that leverages video and high-end photography and paints the picture of the lifestyle that would afford, and why that's the only property that offers that lifestyle.
Ryan, so Jared also talks about emphasizing presentation, including photography and staging and all of that stuff to make that property look well in your marketing efforts. And I know Compass has huge support behind that theory. Tell us a little bit about how you bring a property to market, priced well, looking good, and you feel that it's ready to get out there and get sold. How do you do that? Because people struggle out there, by the way. Agents out there struggle with how to get that presentation correct. And as I've said for years, okay, we're not salespeople. We're marketing people, okay? We don't sell apartments. They sell themselves. In order for them to sell themselves, they have to look good.
We sell the lifestyle. We sell the story. We sell what the real estate
Correct.
enables you to accomplish by owning it.
Correct. How do you do it?
I think
you are a very successful.
I think it
agent.
starts with that very first meeting with the seller, when you're sitting down, when you're talking about why they want to sell, when they're talking about their home, their memories, the renovation that they've done, or just really the story of that home. Like, I really take that all in. Like, that meeting to me is like the setting point for our future relationship. So I think it's just a very important meeting, and I take it all in. And honestly, I really just come up with really creative out-of-the-box concepts, like right then and there with the sellers. I really like to make it a collaborative process. Like, a home, it's not a stock. It's somewhere where they live. They have a passion towards it, and I have a passion for selling and for marketing. So I think it's like really starts with great storytelling. I feel like great pictures are really important. That's the first piece of marketing that anybody sees. And then a really good video. And I think there's like a lot of different ways that you can go about video. I like to have some sort of story to it, some sort of like entertainment, a video that you could showcase the apartment in its best light, and then like make it somewhat entertaining, have some sort of humor to it. And then I like to cut up that video in like 3 or 4 different marketing pieces. And then it's not just about the apartment. It's about the building. It's about the neighborhood. The neighborhood's so important, and I think each neighborhood, like I like how you said, like micro neighborhood, because I actually live in a micro neighborhood. I'm on 60th and West End, which is, I would say, like kind of like an emerging neighborhood that's pretty much just emerged. And we were just talking about it, that it's like, if you're in the neighborhood, I get a lot of people that are in the neighborhood. They love being there, but like getting other people that are in like a Tribeca or Upper East Side, like it's just foreign to them. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a harder sell. So I think really informing them and having a broker that's a specialist that really just like that knows the view breaks, that knows where the coffee shop is, to know how far the subways and the best transportation to get around the city. So just to kind of, it's price, it's presentation, and it's promotion. But I think really taking it to the next level, running digital ads, running taxi cab ads, doing social media, email marketing,
about social media, because that's key.
I mean, I have such a great following now, and I think the key is like being consistent with it. And like, I actually just had like, I would say like a viral breakout, because I've been doing this for so long, and I started off getting a couple hundred views, a couple thousand, and now it's like everything that I'm posting, I'm getting 5,000 plus. So it's just like, it didn't happen overnight. I've been really consistent with it, and I've been consistent about what I've been posting. You know, I've really like stuck to my pillars of content of like who I am, and it hasn't changed. And it's been all about real estate. It's been all about like my family and like what I'm passionate about. I really like bagels. I do bagel reviews.
Okay.
And so I think it's like you really have to connect with your client, and it's a process. Like you're not listing the apartment and selling it tomorrow. Like it's a process and it's a journey, and it has to be a collaboration for it to be successful.
So hold on, we need a bagel tip for your listeners though right now.
There you go.
All about Papa Bagels right now.
Oh,
All right.
Papa Bagels. Okay, we'll do it. That's fine. You're also very consistent on social media. Why is that important in the marketing of?
So I think it's about building a brand, right? And your brand is a personal brand. Your brand is a reflection of what you're going to be able to offer your clients and your brokerage. My social media presence is more dry. From a market standpoint, I try to humanize it with my family and my cute little kids while they stay young and cute. I got a couple more years on that. But consistency is key. There is so much in human nature today that wants that instant gratification. It took me 2 years of doing it consistently to start having it come back in my ecosystem that like, oh, I saw this or I saw that, and now 3 years in, you see that continue to drive the results. But this is not something that happens overnight. This is something where you have to, as was just said, stay true to the core values and be consistent. And if you do it, it'll produce the results that you want it to. But with anything else, it's about making a plan, having a purpose, and understanding how you take those incremental steps to get where you want to be.
And also like taking some risk, like trying it out, putting yourself out there. It's not easy, but you just... what's the worst that's going to happen? You
already have to know.
But the word is consistency.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
You got to stay at it. I teach social media in continuing ed for real estate. And the biggest concern is, I posted something and I got no hits, I got no likes, so I'm just frustrated, I'm not going to do it again. And I say all the time, okay.
Go find a new business.
That too. But one hit wonder doesn't work.
No.
Okay? It worked for music in the 70s and 80s maybe, but it doesn't work anymore. You got to be out there, you got to be consistent, and you got to do your thing. Just quickly, we have a few minutes left. We talked about, the different price points, what's moving, what's not moving. The luxury market is moving, the ultra luxury market is moving, depending on price point, whatever. We mentioned studios, okay? Studios right now are not moving. Anything, I guess, under $1 million really not moving. Greg, why is, in your opinion, from an economic perspective, are the buyers in that price point just kind of sitting back? I mean, we talked about a lot of it today, interest rates, whatever. But what is going to get that area of business moving again?
Well, lower rates will help. Obviously, that's your entry-level buyer. It used to be the studio co-ops were in short supply all the time because that was your entryway into the world of Manhattan real estate. But, as we keep hearing about, it's about pricing, right? And people know that it's costing more even without price increases because they're higher than they would like mortgage rates. We can't call them high mortgage rates because they're about 1% and change lower than the historical rate over the last 50 years.
No one wants to believe that.
But I know, we just want to remember 3%. But I think when you realize that you're paying more than you want, whether it's in the rate or the price, you get a lot more picky and you look for the renovations that we've been talking about. And I always say that like Wall Street is the coldest critic. It'll tell you like, no, that outfit does not look good on you, or that makes you look fat, or whatever it is. And you're talking about the market doing that now. Most of these studios that are that entry level, they're obviously co-ops because condo studios are very expensive, comparatively speaking. And they realize that, and they're going to expect more and more flexibility in the price. Unrenovated co-ops, if you talk to our buddy Michael Vargas, could be back to 2013 prices. Yeah. And because the work and the boards and everything that we've talked about. And I think that entry buyer is they haven't experienced this before too. So the people that have been here and living here for a long time are crazy about everything going on. Imagine, the young person who's now being told, oh, you have to show up to the office now. We expect you to be here, has a hard time getting a rental, wants some security in their expenses. Okay, that's great. That's what home ownership's all about. Let me see. And then they don't like the rate, or they can't find a unit that suits them. and they can't maybe go to that next level of the one bedroom that gets them a little bit more.
I had a rental open house last night. I was so whacked, I couldn't even believe it. Whacked. Okay. A one bedroom, decent price. I mean, I told the doorman, I just need to sit down. Because I was going back and forth from the lobby to this apartment. And, I mean, all good, but insane.
I think the mindset of the under $1 million buyer is that like they actually have a lot of inventory to choose from the rental market.
Yeah.
And also like the stock market and crypto has been doing really well. And they're like, you know what, maybe I should, because, you know, they're just getting started. They're probably young professionals. Like maybe I should be investing not in real estate and in something more liquid.
So when you look, I'm going to steal a couple minutes. When you look at the rent first buy analysis, you know, in the good old days, right, 2015, 16, 17, we would say 3 to 5 years was your quote unquote average break even point. I ran an analysis yesterday. It's 7 to 10 years, right? The reason is we don't have a lot of appreciation. There's a strong opportunity cost with going illiquid from what other assets have been doing. And the fundamental issue with our market, and this will be obvious for anyone that's familiar with Manhattan, but for the listeners that are less so, people buy here by bedroom size, right? And our holding period is shorter. We talked about it earlier, on average 3 to 5 years. If you're talking about general America, you're buying a 4-bedroom or a large house, you're going to grow into it, and you're going to own it for 7 to 10 years. So because our holding period is so short, there's a much higher risk factor, or it doesn't make as much sense to buy something that you're not going to keep. And that's the fundamental issue with studios is for the majority of buyers is a limited duration that you can hold that asset for. So they'd rather just go to the 1 bedroom instead of that. So that's something that's really interesting is you're seeing this upward pressure on the rental market because there's so much demand there. People are staying in the rental market longer than they would have otherwise. We've had a lack of new construction, even on the rental side. So the supply is not keeping up. And yeah, if rates dropped, you'd push more people there. But if you're looking at a 7 to 10 year hold, most people would rather, even if it's going to cost them a little bit more money, have the flexibility, stay liquid, and not be tied to the property and purchase.
Also, just real quick, and most of these studios are in co-ops that have limited sublet policies,
Correct.
and that's a problem too.
Correct.
I was going to end with staying flexible because you say the market provides near instant feedback. So your advice quickly in the 2 minutes we have left on how we as agents can stay flexible in our thinking and in whatever it is we need to do.
Yeah, so first is not be jaded. Every day is a new market. We're dealing with new things and understand really the biggest thing is putting the client first and understanding how are you helping them accomplish their goals. So we have no preset agenda. It's about understanding what the client wants to achieve and meeting the client where they are. So because demand is primary on both sellers and buyers, because the motivation to transact is now largely intrinsically driven, not externally driven. They're not waiting for FOMO. They're not waiting for an interest rate. They're doing it because they need something, because their current space is inadequate, because they want something else. So finding what is making someone decide to sell or buy or rent or not is going to be important. Then painting that picture, explaining that pathway about how we're going to systematically help them achieve their goal, and then making sure that their goal is actually aligned with reality and we can help achieve it. All of that's so important on the outset, and if we're not able to align with them that we can actually help them achieve their goal, then I would argue it's actually more important to not take on that client because it's going to disappoint you, it's going to disappoint the client, it's going to waste your opportunity cost. So being incredibly honest, transparent, and upfront and having that conversation and knowing that, hey, actually this might not be the right thing for either of us is going to be more powerful than taking on a client or relationship you can't ultimately deliver on.
Greg Heym, as our economist, in 35 seconds, where are we going?
It's going to be a bumpy road. I mean, that's the best way I could say it. We're all looking for something. We're looking for a stabilization in the stock market. We're looking for inflation to head lower. We're looking for better mortgage rates. And it's not going to happen overnight. The Fed is the leading cause of recessions in the United States for a reason. They tend to miss things, and they let inflation get too high for too long and just said it was going to go away. Then they said, all right, now we can start cutting rates, and that was a mistake. So we have to ride out, the bumps. And remember, long-term investments, just be informed. That's everybody's job in this industry, whether they're brokers, economists, lenders, is to make sure that those buyers know exactly what they're getting and what are the challenges of that. Because it is hard when the stock market has returned over 20% the last 2 years to say, hey, well, now why don't you buy the studio at this rate? Because they're hearing, especially if they work in finance, why would you do that? You should rent and put your money somewhere else. We have to tell them why that may not be the best idea for them. And there's no such thing as one-size-fits-all advice in anything.
Okay, we are very out of time. So, Jared, Greg, Ryan, thank you so much for being at the table today. Great conversation. We're coming right back with my thoughts for the week. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you hear a lot about how crucial it is to have the right partners in this industry. At Roadway, we don't just move your clients, we give them an experience they'll love. Specialized services to our white glove treatment, it's all about making sure your clients feel taken care of every step of the way. And if you're looking for a rewarding referral program, reach out to me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my thoughts for this week. As I look at 2025, I'm filled with a sense of cautious optimism, yet also a desire to stay adaptable. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air, especially with the ongoing shifts in the economy and the overall changing dynamics of work and our life. While technological advancements continue to accelerate, there's a need to strike a balance between embracing these changes and preserving human connections. On a personal level, I feel that 2025 could be a year of growth and discovery, where new opportunities will arise in unexpected places. At the same time, the importance of staying grounded and focusing on mental well-being is clearer than ever. Whether it's navigating economic shifts over the political environment or balancing work-life dynamics, I'm looking forward to tackling the challenges ahead with the belief that the adaptability and resilience will be key. Because after all, New York City is my town, and real estate is my passion. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. John Lennon said, "Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans." And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I'm very grateful, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.